Okay, Revelation chapter 21. Revelation chapter 21. Again, we're picking up in verse 9, Revelation 21:9. Adam is normally up here on Sunday mornings teaching 2 Samuel, but he's going to be out of pocket today in Nettleton preaching there. So we will cover Revelation this morning. We won't actually pick back up until a week from Wednesday, depending upon everybody's schedule, but we will sing this Wednesday. So we should be in position to just about wrap up the book of Revelation in a week or so. And then, as we said, we plan on going back to the book of Acts once we finish this. So we'll hopefully look forward to that. So as John wraps up these visions that God has given him, he, of course, now has a vision of the end, and for the faithful that is heaven. Some things to fully grasp the greatness of, you just have to be there. I've been to the Grand Canyon, and I can tell you about the Grand Canyon. Some of you have, but I can't adequately explain to you, in my mind, the grandeur of the Grand Canyon. You just have to experience that for yourself. I think that's going to be a lot of what heaven is going to be like. We have this depiction given by God to John, but again, we won't fully grasp the awesomeness and splendor of heaven until, by the grace of God, we are there ourselves. God uses what we call accommodative language here. He describes heaven in terms that we can understand. Somebody illustrated it like this: if we were to go, say, into a remote country, and those folks had never seen an airplane, and we were going to describe an airplane to them, well, we can't start talking about wheels because they don't know what wheels are. We can't talk about engines because they don't know what engines are. But we could describe an airplane to them in terms of a what? That they would know about. A bird. Okay? You see that eagle flying above? Well, men have created a huge eagle, or bird if you will, so large it has an inside and people can sit on the inside and they can actually fly on that bird. Now, the parallel obviously isn't exact in every respect, but that would help people understand, hey, we can actually fly like a bird from place to place. I think that's what God is doing through John here. He is describing heaven in terms that we understand. We know about gold. We'd like to have some maybe, but we know about it, and diamonds and jewels and so forth. And that helps us from a human standpoint understand maybe a little bit of how great heaven is going to be. Or we sing the song, how beautiful heaven must be. And you get that from, again, Revelation 21 and 22. So sometimes we need help in our minds understanding concepts that we don't readily grasp. You could use the illustration of computer language. All a computer understands are zeros and ones. That's all it understands. And so for those who program computer code, you're not going to sit there and type out 10 zillion zeros and ones. So that has to be compiled in a language that we can understand, shorthand if you will, that helps us understand, what the code in the computer actually is. So I think that's what God is doing through John in Revelation chapter 21 and chapter 22. So let's look now, beginning in verse number 9. We have what we call the scene of the city, and I'll read these 3 verses. And there came unto me, who's the me? John, one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials or bowls full of the 7 last plagues, and talked with me, saying, Come here, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. He carried me away in the Spirit to a great high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, and her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. So again, a lot of angels in heaven, and John meets and sees some of these and hears some of them. And now he has already looked at or been with one of these angels, perhaps. They had the 7 bowls. They showed John the judgment that was about to come upon the Roman Empire. But now this angel has different message for the faithful, and it is a most beautiful message of the bride. I believe we talked a bit Wednesday evening about the bride, and my understanding is the bride is the church. The bride is the church. Now, everybody doesn't agree, and I'm not going to have a falling out with anybody who takes a different view, but I believe it makes sense to me that, of course, the glory of the church and the end result of the church is heaven. So why, and elsewhere the church is spoken of as the bride of Christ, so why not here? And she's called the New Jerusalem, she's called the Holy Jerusalem, and now she's called the bride, the Lamb's wife. And again, I think all talking about the same. I'm going to show you. Now again, this hasn't happened yet. The church is not in heaven yet, obviously. So this would be future, as of John's time and even as of our time, I believe. So verse 10, this angel, John says, carried me away in the Spirit. In other words, this didn't really happen physically, but in this vision it happened. To a great and high mountain. What's one advantage of standing on top of a great high mountain? Now you can see for miles and miles, can't you? Those folks who've conquered Mount Everest, the world's tallest mountain, they get up to the top and there's camera footage. And a lot of things I didn't know about, but a lot of things, of course, when you're that elevation of where jets cruise, 29,000 plus feet, what about the temperature up there? They have trouble keeping their cameras working. It is so cold. A lot of folks don't make it down. They make it up there and think they've got it made, and they get careless coming down. The oxygen's so thin up there, a lot of folks die coming down. And guess what happens to their bodies? Just leave them up there. It's too dangerous. Sometimes they'll take some of them down, but it's too dangerous to try to carry the bodies down because of the elevation. But again, the view. The view. If you've been to Mount Evans in Colorado, I know Pikes Peak gets the most attention, but Mount Evans is actually higher than Pikes Peak. And you can, we went there on our honeymoon, and you can see it's a wonderful scene. You can see Denver. I mean, you can see for miles and miles. So John is taken and he's carried to this great mountain with this great high scene. Tanya and I went and saw a movie last week called Fall, and it wasn't good to me. It could have been good, but with the language and the lack of clothing, to me, it just spoiled everything. But it was about two girls who climbed a 2,000-foot TV tower. It was dilapidated and the ladder fell. So they're on top, 2,000 feet. They got a splendid view. What's the problem? How do we get down? And I won't spoil it for you, but it's just fiction. But what a view. Those actresses actually did climb a tower. It was 60 feet. But you know, if you fall from 60 feet, you might as well fall from, what, George? Not going to make a whole lot of difference, right? Just the length of time before you hit. But anyway, what a view. The point is, what a view they had. What a view John has. A great and high mountain. And showed me that great city. In other words, John has a vantage point of looking at the bride of Christ from a distance, the gathering of God's people in all of its splendor, and what a scene that was. Having the glory of God, verse 11. And her lot was like a stone most precious. Now, I haven't been around a whole lot of jewelry. I've been in a jewelry store a time or two. But they display that in those cases where the light hits it just right, right? I mean, those jewels sparkle, don't they? And if you've got your wife along or girlfriend along or whatever, I mean, you better be reaching into your wallet because they know how to display those, the brilliance of that. Well, that's the depiction here of the bride. She is brilliant, shining like a stone, like a jasper stone. Some of these stones we're going to read about, we don't exactly know what they are. Some believe the jasper stone may be, what's the girl's best friend? Man's best friend is what? Dog. Girl's best friend's a diamond. Doesn't seem quite equal, does it? But anyway, some believe this may be a diamond. It doesn't matter what the name of the stone is, but this is the glory of the church, is what John is seeing here. Notice the security of the city or the church. Verse 12. Had a wall great and high. Why, once again, did cities in Bible times build great high walls around them? What purpose? Protection. Protection. We don't have walls built around cities today, in our culture at least. While they might offer some protection from the ground, all somebody's got to do is get in a plane and drop a bomb, and the wall's not going to help you one bit. So we have other means of defending our cities. But back then, the wall was your best defense. It was said of ancient Babylon that you could drive 4 chariots side by side on top of that wall. I don't know how many feet that would be, but you're looking at least, 15 to 20 feet thick walls. And Babylon felt like she would never be conquered. And she was conquered from within, as most cities and empires fall from within. But again, walls were built for protection. The stronger the wall, the more secure the city. And so you get the concept of heaven being secure. There won't be any threats, though, from enemies in heaven, because enemies will be banished to hell. So we won't have to worry about that, but the concept of security is a comforting thing. So I saw a wall great and high, and this wall had 12 gates. If you've ever been to a football game in a large stadium, do they just have one gate to let people in? If they did, number one, it would take forever to get everybody in and out. And God forbid, if there's an emergency, if you've only got one exit, then you've got some people who most likely will die. Some people have been trampled to death trying to flee because there weren't enough exits. So the concept of 12 gates, ample entrance, may be the figure that God is giving John here, ample entrance. In other words, you won't have to stand in line. You won't have to worry, am I going to get in or not, or something of that nature. There is ample entrance into heaven. So 12 gates, and we're going to read about 12 angels. What are some other things in the Bible that connect the number 12 to them, or have the number 12 connected? 12 apostles, 12 tribes of Israel. We're going to see that. Well, in fact, that's in this verse, isn't it? 12 gates. At the gates, 12 angels. So, to help us humans comprehend, as if the door out there is a gate, you've got angels there at the gate. Now, in the Garden of Eden, what did God place there at the garden to keep Adam and Eve out? Angels, right? Cherubim with flaming swords to keep them out. Well, obviously, these angels at the gates of heaven would not be for to keep people out. They would be to welcome you in, to greet you perhaps. Again, just trying to help us understand. Names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. In other words, these would be a reference to the people, the faithful of the Old Testament. There will be many people who are not members of the church in heaven. Correct? Noah never was a member of the church, was he? Abraham was never a member of the church. Job wasn't. But they will be in heaven, not because they weren't members of the church, but because they were faithful to God under the law in which they lived. So it's not just members of the church who will be in heaven. We read of Old Testament saints. Many of them obviously will be there. Notice verse 13 here, sort of the arrangement of the symmetry. On the east, 3 gates. On the north, 3 gates. On the south, 3 gates. And on the west, 3 gates. You may think back to the book of Numbers. When Israel camped in the wilderness, God had them camp in an orderly fashion. He had 3 tribes facing the east, 3 tribes facing the north, 3 tribes facing the south, and 3 tribes facing the west. So the concept again of guarding, of order, of symmetry. And again, the same, I believe, concept here. Again, 12 angels, 12 gates, 12 tribes, and now we read of 12 foundations and 12 apostles in verse 14. And I believe this to be a reference to stability. The walls of the city had 12 foundations. Those who build things know before you start putting up walls, you need to have a good, solid foundation. Now, obviously, depending on what you're going to build. If you're just putting up a fence in the backyard, you might pour some concrete in a hole and stick a post in it, and that might be good enough. But if you're building a skyscraper, you're going to dig deep, and you're going to pour tons and tons of concrete and use rebar and things of that nature. It seems as if when a large building is being erected, it takes forever to start seeing walls going up, right? We think they're slow as Christmas, but they're taking the time to dig and lay a deep foundation. The taller the building, what about the foundation? The deeper and stronger the foundation. You know, what's the tower that leans in Italy? Tower of Pisa. One reason it leans, the fellow didn't dig deep enough. Well, it turned out to be really a good thing, I guess. I mean, you think of all the tourists that go there. There are those who say, well, maybe one day it might fall over. Who knows? I think they try to revamp that every once in a while. But again, it's sort of a tourist attraction, so a bad thing turned out to be a good thing. But again, you want to lay a solid foundation if you're going to build something. And so you think of God doesn't do anything halfway. When He created this universe, He made no mistakes. And what the beauty of it. And building heaven, from our vantage point, we think of building. This is the language that God uses to help us understand. I mean, He doesn't cut any corners. No shoddy materials. No inferior craftsmanship. He does it, it's done right. 12 foundations, and in them the name of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. I believe this is simply a reference to the faithful of the Old Testament and the faithful of the New Testament. Now, literally, we know there were more than 12 apostles because somebody took Judas's place. Who was that? Matthias. And we know that Paul actually became an apostle. But the figure, the 12, came to be used of the apostles, whether there were 11 or 13 or 14. Sort of like the Big Ten or the Pac-12. There may not be that exact number of teams now, but they're still called the Big Ten and the Pac-12 because there were originally those number of teams. So the number stuck. And so here with the apostles, there were literally more than 12. But again, this simply representative, I believe, of the faithful in the Old Testament and the faithful in the New. 15. Let's talk about in this vision how big heaven's going to be, is sort of the idea here. The angel who talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city. Well, that people who read this understood measuring by a reed. Today we would use a yardstick, that would be our reed, or better yet, a tape measure, or better yet, I don't have one, but I'd like to have one of those laser beams. This is the neatest thing. If you're putting this crown molding up, you want to know how far it is from here to here, just stick that device up there, point it where it hits at the end, it gives you the measurement. Any of you have one of those? Don't have one, David? Well, we need one of those, don't we? That's the neatest thing. Well, obviously they didn't have that back then. God could use whatever, but to help people understand how big heaven's going to be, we have these figures here. To measure the city, the gates, the wall thereof, how spacious heaven's going to be. It's not going to be crowded. We think of large cities. I mean, people build houses. I mean, right, you don't have a yard. You can reach out and touch your neighbor's house, or you go up, and you've got these huge apartments and people crowded. Not going to be that way in heaven, is the concept here. 16, the city lies four square. Some would say that's a bit redundant. If something is square, it has how many sides? Four. A square has four sides, okay? But again, this is four square in the concept of a cube. Four square, the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs. I'm reading out of the King James language here, and we don't measure by furlongs today. I'm told that a furlong is about 1/8 of a mile. So you can round this up. I think some computed the exact measurement, 1,380 miles, or most round that up to about 1,500 miles. 1,500 miles. 1,500 miles long, 1,500 miles wide, and 1,500 miles what? High. A huge cube is the idea, and if the computation is somewhere near accurate, about 2,250,000 square miles. Is it a big city? It's a big city. It's an awfully big city, and again, to help our minds comprehend this, the idea of spaciousness. The spaciousness. Verse 17, he measured the wall of it, 144 cubits. Now, we're talking not about furlongs now. We're talking about cubits. And again, in Bible times, the cubit, most people use their arm from the tip of the middle finger to the elbow is about 12 to 18 inches. I hadn't measured mine, but on average, that's about 1.5 feet, and they use that measurement to measure smaller things. Instead of reeds, the cubit. And so this would equal somewhere in the neighborhood of 218 feet. And we don't know if this is the breadth or the height of the wall. But the concept, again, for us is spaciousness. Spaciousness in heaven. Look at the beauty in verse 18. The building of the wall of it was of jasper, again maybe of the diamond. The city was pure gold, like unto clear glass. Never seen anything like it. You can go online, and artists have, pictured renditions of what they think this may have looked like, or may look like rather, but there's really no compare. We won't know until we're actually there. But we know the value of gold and diamonds. And then verse 19, these precious stones. The foundations of the wall of the city were garnished with all manner of precious stones. Some of these, we don't know what they were or are, because words do change meaning. The jasper, we know the sapphire. The chalcedony, many believe that to be a copper type color. Emerald, we know of. Sardonyx, sardius, chrysolite, beryl, topaz, chrysoprasus, jasmine, amethyst. And we don't have to know exactly what those are just to grab the concept of beauty and splendor and glory of heaven. verse 21 rather, the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Can you imagine a gate made out of pearls? Some ladies would just be content to have what? A necklace made out of pearls. Can you imagine having a gate, honey? Look outside. I've got a gate to our driveway. It's made out of solid pearls. Well, no time soon. But anyway, that the glory of that. The street of the city was pure gold, as it were transparent glass. Can you imagine the cost of a mile of road in pure gold. It is expensive enough in concrete, right? Or tar, or whatever they use, but solid gold for a road. Can't fathom that. But I didn't see a temple, verse 22. We think about the temple, we think about offerings and sacrifice. But there's not going to be any need in heaven for offerings or sacrifice, because Jesus, he took the care of all that in his death. No temple there. The Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it. Reason enough to want to go to heaven. Just forget about the streets of gold, or the street of gold and the gates of pearl and all those gems and the glory of it. Reason enough to go to heaven is because God is going to be there, and because the Lord is going to be there. But to give us incentive, he speaks of its glory. 23, there's no sun in heaven. There's no moon in heaven. Why? Does that mean there's no light in heaven? Where's the light coming from? God and the Lamb. The glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. We need the sun in this life. We wouldn't live long without it. And isn't it remarkable that the earth is just the right distance from the sun, that we don't burn up and we don't freeze to death? If God had placed us on Mercury or Venus, we wouldn't have been placed there long. If God had placed us on Mars or Pluto, we might have been there a split second. But he knew exactly where to place us. And this all happened by chance, right? Just billions of years, and it all worked itself out, some folks would have us believe, which is utter nonsense. But no need for sun and moon in heaven, because God lightens heaven. 24, the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light of it. The saved are in heaven. Kings who are saved, I don't know how many there would be, but kings of the earth do bring their glory and their honor into it. 25, the gates of it shall not be shut at all by day, for there shall be no night there. In biblical cities and Bible times, at the end of the day, they shut the gates. Why would they do that? Why do you shut your door and lock it at night? Keep people out for protection. Okay, that's the main reason we do that. Main reason they shut the gates to the city at night, to keep enemies out. Okay, there's no need for that in heaven. No need to shut the gate. Number one, nobody would want to leave, correct? And second, no enemy could come in, because the enemy's already been disposed of. 26, they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. All the glory and honor is in heaven, which means there is no glory and no honor in torment or in hell. And then the last verse, 27, and there shall in no wise, or other translations render that, there shall by no means, no way is this going to happen, by no means shall enter into heaven anything that defiles, nor what works abomination, or makes a lie. Okay, the filth, the abominable, the cesspool of sin we see all around us, none of that is going to be in heaven. Just not going to be there. And again, we think about our present world, we think about how that describes our present world, but we want to make a difference in our present world. We want to make sure that our names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life, and do everything in our power to help others' names be written there also, so that they can obey the gospel. Again, this, I believe, is God's way of helping our minds get just a tiny grasp of how beautiful heaven is going to be. Don't you want to go? Certainly want to go. Any comments as we wrap up our class this morning? If not, it'll be, if the schedule is halfway correct, a week from Wednesday. And I don't know if we'll finish chapter 22 in one setting. We may, but we'll pick that up about a week from this Wednesday. So for now, we'll close at this point.